plants, as an economist, I can tell you that the return on plants today, okay, in hunter-gatherers today, the average return is about 1,500 calories per hour of work. The average return on not very big animal is 50,000 calories.
Right.
So it's like a different order of magnitude. So people at that time, at least, could not live on plants. So anyway.
There were no vegans.
No vegans whatsoever.
Welcome to the Fundamental Health Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Paul Saladino. This podcast is the result of my relentless search to understand and correct the roots of chronic disease and illness. In this podcast, I will share with you everything I have learned about how to live the most healthy and radical life possible. Thanks for joining me on this journey. What's going on, you guys? I have an amazing guest this week. This is my conversation with Miki Ben Dor. Some of you may know him. He is a very well-regarded paleoanthropologist at the University of Tel Aviv in Israel. Paleoanthropology was actually his second career. Previous to that, I believe he was in economics and finance, but became so fascinated with Paleolithic origins of humans, where we've come from an evolutionary perspective, that he went back to school, got a PhD, and is now making great contributions in this space. In this podcast, we talk about our human evolution, what we know, the Paleolithic fossil record, evidence that early humans were primarily consuming meat, where we've come from, other evidence in our human design that we are hunters and have always been focused on meat and animal foods as the primary foods. Does this sound familiar? Yes, it does, because this is what I believe as well. And so it is so cool to get to talk to Miki about these fascinating concepts. I think that you will all very much enjoy this conversation, and it will put everything into perspective. In the beginning of my book, which is now finished and in the editing process and will be available for pre-order very soon, the first two chapters are all about anthropology. It's all about where we've come from, the evolution of humans, the size of our brains changing radically about the same time that we started hunting, and then how it all went wrong with the agricultural revolution 12,000 years ago. So many of the things that we talk about in this podcast with Miki are things that I talk about in the beginning of my book, and I think it's where most discussions of how humans are designed to eat should begin and upon which they revolve. So this is very relevant. On that note, I will be letting you guys know. If you're signed up for my newsletter, you'll know right away. If you're not signed up for my newsletter, which is called the Fundamental Health Insider, go to my website, carnivoremd.com, sign up for that. The people who are signed up for that will know first when my book is available for pre-order, and those who buy the book on pre-order will get access to an upcoming exclusive live Ask Me Anything session. You guys, if you buy the book on pre-order, you will be able to dial in and ask me questions live in the next month or so. Anyone who buys the book on that way will get access to me in an Ask Me Anything. You can ask me whatever you want as a thank you for supporting me by ordering the book ahead of time. The book should be formally released probably late this year or early January. It is a doozy. There are over 300 references, probably about 350 to 400 pages, depending on how much we leave in with the editing. It is an amazing collection of all my thoughts. I put my heart and soul in this, guys. I poured myself into it. So I'm super excited to share that with you soon. The book is called The Carnivore Code, and there's information about that on my website, Carnivore MD, as well. Okay, so this podcast is sponsored, as always. These have become my people, White Oak Pastures, an amazing group of people, 6th generation farm, 150 years, doing regenerative agriculture. They've been certified as carbon negative, meaning they sequester more carbon into the soil than they produce. That is leading the way in regenerative agriculture as a savory hub, and showing us all that by raising ruminants in that fashion, we can sequester more greenhouse gases than we are producing. I believe that this type of regenerative agriculture is the future of what we should be doing with all of our raising of animals, and one of the main avenues by which we may decrease overall greenhouse gases in the environment and turn the tide on global climate change. You can use the code CarnivoreMD at their website, which is whiteoakpastures.com, to get grass-fed, grass-finished beef, all of their amazing good stuff. They have Iberian pork fat back in stock. Carnivore MD will get you 10% off your order. If you are a first-time ordering patron of White Oak Pastures, you are in for a treat. If you have ordered from them before, go to info.whiteoakpastures.com/carnivoremd to see all of the new deals that they are offering in partnership with me, and use the code carnivore15 for, I believe it's 15% off of beef bones, beef fat, tongue, and some other great stuff that is on sale this week. We will be rotating things that are on special, so listeners of this podcast will get exclusive deals through White Oak Pastures. White Oak Cella is our gathering at White Oak Pastures. It's going to happen December 14th and 15th. We are finalizing details, but it is definitely going to happen. So if you want to come to Bluffton, Georgia and hang out with me and the Strong sisters, Ashley and Sarah Armstrong, I'm hoping that my friend Ken Berry will be there and some other folks in the paleo space. We will be doing all sorts of fun things. I'll give a talk. We'll do farm tours and just kind of celebrate a carnivore community gathering. So definitely, if you are in the Southeast, come to White Oak Cella December the 14th and 15th. We'd love to see you there. It's free. And we hope that the weather will be good in December there. My other sponsor is Ancestral Supplements. You guys know about these folks. They are making grass-fed organ meats and bone marrow from New Zealand, from very pure, clean sources in the idyllic land of Lord of the Rings, the New Zealand hobbit forests and knolls where these amazing cows graze and lead happy lives and are cared for well. Their nutritious diets and the way they are raised really do create higher quality organs and meat that will nourish us deeply. They have a wide array of supplements. They have everything from heart, liver, spleen, organ meats. In the complex, they have intestines, which I've talked about. They have prostate. They have colostrum now, which is a very interesting supplement that is from the first milk that cows produce and has a lot of antibodies in it. So a lot of people are finding benefits with colostrum in terms of gut issues and using that potentially to quell inflammation in the gut by adding extra antibodies to the gut lumen. So check out their colostrum. That one has been a very popular supplement for them. And it is from these amazing grass-fed happy cows in New Zealand doing amazing things. So you can use the code SaladinoMD at their Shopify site to get 10% off your order. But if you are not able to get organ meats in your diet, these are a fantastic adjunct, and I am certain that they will improve your overall nutritional status, and you will notice significant improvements and feel better with these. And you can target them to what you're experiencing. You might want to start with something like liver and bone marrow, but if you have gut issues, think about the intestines. If you have urinary issues, think about kidney or prostate. It's all good, but I think that it does make sense ancestrally to potentially use the gland, which we're needing help in, to benefit us. I think that there is some validity to the like versus like concept, and we're learning that the more organ meats we eat, the more nose-to-tail we eat, the better we do as humans. So check out Ancestral Supplements and White Oak Pastures. And now on to the podcast with my buddy Miki Ben Dor. You guys are going to love this one. I appreciate you all. Sponsor this week is Native Deodorant. I appreciate what these guys are doing because there are so many junky personal care products on the market right now full of all kinds of bad things, aluminum, parabens, talc, and Native is made with like natural stuff. So I'm totally behind this. I've used it in the past. I've used the coconut and vanilla one. I like it. It actually works pretty darn well for an aluminum-free deodorant. You don't have to smell. We are all clansmen and tribes, women, and people that want to be out in the woods and doing awesome stuff. But in our professional environments, we can't always have stinky or sweaty armpits. And so something like Native Deodorant is a really good idea. They've got over 8,000 five-star reviews and are loved widely. They have fewer, simpler ingredients. They, of course, never have aluminum, and they have all kinds of great scents. They have a total risk-free trial. They'll offer free exchanges if you don't like it. So check out this Native natural deodorant if you are in the market for a way to make your armpits smell better, less bad, without putting a bunch of chemicals in there. So this is a very ancestral way to be doing things. You can use the code nativedeodorant.com. You can use the code Saladino at nativedeodorant.com for 20% off your first purchase. And they will know that I sent you. Let me know what you think of this stuff, guys. I am able to promote them because I believe in their message, and I believe in companies like this that are providing personal care products to people without bad stuff in them. So check out Native, check out the other sponsors. On to the podcast. What is up, you guys? I am back. This is the Fundamental Health Podcast. I just named it recently, so this is the new named Fundamental Health Podcast. I am Paul Saladino, MD. I hope you're listening to this on YouTube or maybe iTunes, but I am really excited today to be with Miki Ben Dor. He is a paleoanthropologist, and I am learning so much from him. It's been so interesting for me on this carnivore journey to learn about human history, where humans have come from, where we've evolved from, and lots of interesting recent research about ideas looking at nitrogen balance, which we're going to talk about, suggesting that humans are probably high-level carnivores based on our ancient history. So Miki, thanks for being with us. I really appreciate you being here.
My pleasure.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background so we know where you've come from, because you've had an interesting journey yourself. I've heard you on other podcasts, and you have a personal story. I know you've been speaking about this for years. I first heard you in 2012 at the Ancestral Health Symposium. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your history and your background.
Okay. I started my academic career, so to speak. I started as an economist. Yeah, I became an economist, and I did a BA in economy and then an MBA. And I worked in all kinds of jobs. In the last job, I was actually selling companies for a living. And at age 52, I became completely disinterested in this business situation. I didn't feel satisfied, so I decided to retire. I had enough reserves to retire, and I gathered my children and my wife, and I said, "This is it. I'm not going to work anymore." And the justification that I gave them was that we are not genetically built to work. This is unnatural.
I love it.
I started with this hunter-gatherer, admiring hunter-gatherer or looking at hunter-gatherers as model when I was like 20, 21 at university. I used it to explain a lot of things that I see around me as like hunter-gatherers that are living in an urban modern society and have difficulties because of it. So anyway, that was my explanation for my family. And then I started to learn about hunter-gatherers. I went to university and just, as a free listener. And after a while, after about 4 years or so, I don't remember exactly, but I sat down and I said, okay, I learned enough. Now I'm going to write a book, Why Everybody Should Also Retire. And I wrote a book, which was more on the mental side of things, not on the physiological side, but I decided to write a chapter about diet as well. I didn't practice paleo diet at that time because I thought I was doing the right stuff. I was doing whatever, I was advised to do. But when I started reading, it's like researching for that chapter, I became flabbergasted. I said, that can't be. The whole world is completely crazy. Everybody, we are killing ourselves. And I don't know if you want to get into it, but whoever wants to get into it can go to my my blog and
Yeah.
read about General McCallum. No, General. Forgot his name. General Mac. I forgot his name.
What's the name of your blog so people can go there?
Paleostyle.com.
Paleostyle.com?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
People can go there and read about this.
Macarister. Okay, Macarister. I got it. And Macarison, actually, what he found out, I'm just cutting very short. He found out that food is everything. He found out that when you change the food, when you change the diet, mice get all kinds of illnesses just because of changing the diet. And anyway, I came to that conclusion, and since then I could not sleep at night. I had to do something about it. So I looked around, and I decided that what's missing is a paleoanthropologist with understanding in nutrition. So I started learning nutrition and paleoanthropology. And that's how I did my PhD. It took me about 6 years because I had to do all kinds of, because I came from economy, I didn't come from archaeology. It took me 6 years and I did my PhD, and here I am today.
That's such an awesome story. I love this idea of food as connected with health. That is something that I am completely on board with that. And I think that Western medicine hopefully will eventually realize that, but I agree completely. Food is everything. Food is who we are. And so it's so cool to hear about, to have you on and to talk about how our interactions with food and animals have shaped who we are as humans. So one of the things that's been interesting for me throughout this process as a physician is to kind of go back and learn about anthropology. I am the most amateur anthropologist. I'm just the armchair anthropologist. But I think it would be interesting for people to just begin at the beginning, and I hope people will find this useful, to just talk about where humans have come from before we even get into these ideas about what humans were eating, but just where humans have come from and the timeline, just a quick summary of the timeline of different human species and where we've come from and the time frames that we're thinking about here. Many people may have read this book, Sapiens. I think this idea of Homo sapiens as not the only Homo species is a kind of a crazy concept for people, not for an anthropologist, but for us, in like mainstream society, this idea that like, whoa, we had other people that we were existing with that were also Homo species, and there were Neanderthals. And so let's just paint this picture for people in terms of where humans have come from, and then I'll do a screen share and show people a picture of this. But tell us where humans have come from and how long we've been walking the earth and what's our history.
Okay, humans are primates. So primates is a group of monkeys that are relatively smart. And we split from other primates about 6 to 7 million years ago. So we had a common ancestor with chimp and bonobo, which are the closest relatives, about 6 to 7 million years ago. 5 million years ago, you already see like a primate that is spending some time on the ground as well as on trees. And then 4 million years ago, just say 4 million years ago, we see Australopithecus that most probably spent most of this time on the ground. You can see it from the structure of his foot, all kind of stuff. So this is Lucy. Okay.
Right. People have heard of this, maybe heard of Lucy. If you go to the National Geographic Museum, Lucy was an Australopithecus.
Right, and there are several Australopithecus, and we won't go into each one of them. It's not my area of expertise. The first Homo, the first species to be called Homo is Homo habilis. Now, there are some people that are actually thinking that it's not a real Homo, it's more like Australopithecus, but this is something that you can expect from a species that like in between, okay? That it will not be 100% Homo, but not 100% and not 100%. So it's like an intermediate species, in my opinion. And the real Homo, in my opinion, starts with Homo erectus. So when I talk about humans, I talk about Homo erectus. Homo erectus started his career with a brain size of about 700 cc. Just for comparison, you're talking about chimpanzees with 400, 450 cc and Australopithecus with the same size, more or less. Mm-hmm. So the brain size of Australopithecus, most of them was not much different than that of a chimpanzee. Now, if we go a little back to the nutrition side, because really what makes most species different is their nutrition.
Right.
And so you see that chimpanzees and Australopithecus, both of them had a very large gut. Mm-hmm. Okay, the digestive system was large. So what happens with Homo erectus is that this digestive system is more or less the same size as ours. You can see it from the chest, from the structure of the chest.
We don't have these big protuberant bellies
right,
that many of these animals look like they had. We have kind of like six-pack abs, some of us, or some people, people that are healthy, like, yeah, or we have a flat stomach.
Yeah, you can see it also from the teeth, because there has to be coherence between the teeth size and the digestive system. So that means that all of them relied on fiber as the main source of calories. I calculated once the diet of chimps. There is information about their diet. And if you take the fiber and you take it at about 1.5 calories per gram, you find out that about 50% of their calories came from short fatty acid, saturated fatty acid, from fiber. So, and the Australopithecus, in my opinion, and I think in everybody's opinion, were also, that was their main diet. The main source of calories was fiber.
Exactly.
And this makes sense because most of the calories in nature, actually, are in the form of fiber, mm-hmm. in leaves and in whatever.
Right.
The fruits, even the fruits that they ate were full of fiber. So Homo erectus, it's clear, did not have the same nutrition, the same source of food as Australopithecus, and of course the chimps. So after by the way, the Homo erectus was the most successful species, human species, okay? It lasted from 2 million years ago to somewhere in Asia, I think even 300,000 years ago, something like that, 1.5 million years for sure.
Right, I've heard people talk about this, that Homo erectus will be the longest lived Homo species, and that Homo sapiens will probably not live for that amount of time. We will wipe ourselves out, right? We don't know, but we will
change. We will change to a different species, I think.
Right, but the fact that Homo erectus lasted so long, they were incredibly successful.
Right. And so, and then then there are other species like Homo heidelbergensis. Again, there's some arguments about this. Because most of the species, all of them actually, are determined by measuring skulls and all kind of morphological, because this is what remains, right? Bones.
Yes.
So But there's a big question of when a species is becoming a species, okay? Because the evolution doesn't stop. It works all the time, and it changes all the time. Sometimes slowly, sometimes more quickly. So Homo heidelbergensis, to me, is just another Homo erectus, but that's my private view.
Sure, yeah.
But people, like to call names. So there's this one. In Europe, there is another species, Homo antecessor, in Spain, for instance. So there are some Homo species, and then about 300,000 years ago, also again, it's also a question of definition, but then you find Homo neanderthalis, what we call Neanderthal in Europe. And then you find, of course, Homo sapiens in Africa 300,000 years ago. Now, if we were talking like 2 years ago, I would have said 200,000 years ago, but now we know that it existed already 300,000 years ago.
So there's this really interesting concept, and I think we'll dig into this with some of these studies, that the Neanderthals and Homo sapiens were living at the same time, and that was about 300,000 years ago, 200,000 years ago. And so we were all on the planet at the same time. And this is one of the things that's so interesting for me. And it's so, interesting to learn, is this idea that, wow, like we've been on the planet with different species throughout our evolution. I'll just pause here and do a screen share for people who are watching on YouTube. And I will show this graph. So this is kind of what Miki is talking about. And again, I'm not the expert, but I pulled up this graph and I think it helped me illustrate it. We have Australopithecus here, and here's Lucy, Australopithecus afarensis. Thank you. So 4 million.
Discovered in Afar in Ethiopia.
Okay, so we got 4 million years ago. And then this is what Miki is talking about here, is that we have Homo erectus about 1.8 million years ago. And there's also Homo habilis, Homo rudolfensis, and then also this Homo heidelbergensis, which we're talking about. Yeah. But then we see Homo neanderthalensis and Homo sapiens here. Just they're saying 300,000 to 350,000 years ago. But this is the general consensus here, or the general idea that, like, we have come from these Homo species 2 million years ago, but only within the last 300,000 years ago has Homo sapiens walked the earth at the same time as Homo neanderthalensis. So this is such a cool concept. And you can even see on this diagram a little bit, they're just using, a shadow here, but like Miki pointed out, the gut, the gut and the protuberance of these Australopithecus species, these primate species, was very different. And we will probably get into all of that. I'm sure we'll get into that during this talk, but it's such an interesting idea that like all these species have been on the earth, but really probably let's dive into what happened, or what was happening 200, 300,000 years ago, because I think that that's something that's quite interesting for you and I, because that's when Homo sapiens was around. That's when Neanderthals were around. And we can talk about, you brought up this point, I love it. What we eat makes us who we are. And so from your perspective as an anthropologist, it seems that humans changed their diet, when we became Homo erectus, but certainly there's evidence that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens had this unique type of diet that probably shaped who we are.
Right. So my theory, okay, I'm not sure how many people, how many of my colleagues share this theory, but is that our diet didn't change much as we went and became Neanderthalensis and sapiens. But what changed was the type of animals that we hunted. So I don't want to talk about the Neanderthal, it's a different story, but about the Homo sapiens. Let's talk for a minute about Homo sapiens.
Right.
So Homo erectus was a hunter of big animals, like huge animals. You're talking about elephants that weigh 12 tons. So today an elephant weighs 4 tons. So you can imagine.
I can't even imagine.
You can't imagine. No, we can't imagine that.
I mean,
Huge animal.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he was a hunter of these, of course, smaller animals, 1-ton animal and 500-kilo animal, and even smaller animal, but mostly big animals. And about 400, 500,000 years ago in Africa, there was a change in the they call it a turnover of species. And the large species started to disappear. This 12-ton elephant disappeared and was replaced by the 4-ton animal. And some other animals, some other large animals also disappeared, and smaller animals came instead of them. So my theory is that this change of species actually came because humans had to cope with hunting more smaller animals, but while still maintaining the same energetic efficiency. And this is very important, this energy business. I'm an economist, so it's very easy for me to think in terms of energy, in terms of currency, okay? You have a certain amount of currency. You cannot spend more. By the way, this is also very basic. In the past, people thought, okay, so, let's say we spend 2,000 calories, and then something happens, and from now on, we have to spend 4,000 calories. We just have to work harder. But otherwise, it's okay. Well, you cannot, because this is I don't know if you know Ponzer work. The energetic expenditure is highly regulated. You just cannot. What happens if you spend more, if you think you're spending more energy, what happens is that the amount that you spent on, let's say, on mobility, on walking, running, whatever you had to do, comes on the account of your basic metabolic rate, basic function, okay? Like like immunity, fecundity, everything like that. All the basic functions in the body, not all of them, but some of them, are actually going down to account in order to compensate for the calories, the more calories that you spend in activity. Mm-hmm. You understand my point?
Yes.
It's so let's say you have a Homo erectus. Let's say he spent 2,200 calories and he was getting his food, no problem. And then these large animals start to disappear, and he has to hunt for each 12 tons elephant. He has to hunt, let's say, I don't know, 20 smaller. So of course it costs, energetically, it's more expensive. But not only that, this is only the beginning. There comes the fat business.
Right.
Okay. So large animals have relatively more fat than small animals. This is a law of nature. And if you are a carnivore, and this is what I assume, and we can talk about that too, if you are like hypercarnivore is about 70, this is like the definition. That's why they call it hypercarnivore. More than 70% of his food come from meat and fat. You are limited in the amount of protein that you can consume, because to consume protein for energy, you have to remove the ammonium and you have to make it urea. So you have to, first of all, use the liver to make it urea, and then the kidneys, and then to remove it. So in these two processes are limited. So you're limited to about in humans, about 35% of your calories. I'm talking long term, because you probably be able to eat 100% in 1 day or 2 days or 3 days or a week. But
exactly.
Long term, you are limited to 35% or so. So 65% have to come from something else. Now, if you hunt, you don't want to hunt and not be able to use all the energy that you caught. So you're actually looking for animals that have the 65% fat, or maybe 50%, and the rest, the 15%, you're getting from plants. I don't want to create the impression that humans didn't eat plants. They did eat plants.
Right.
There's no question about it. There's no argument about it. But plants, as an economist, I can tell you that the return on plants today, okay, in hunter-gatherers today, the average return is about 1,500 calories per hour of work. The average return on not very big animal is 50,000 calories.
Right.
So it's like a different order of magnitude. So people at that time, at least, could not live on plants. So anyway.
There were no vegans.
No vegans whatsoever.
There were no vegans. And like you're saying, and we can show some of these studies, a lot of the anthropologic evidence suggests that humans were hypercarnivores, that we were getting the majority of our nutrition from animals. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that, but I'm telling you, you'll find some paleoanthropologists that will not agree.
Right, so it's debated, and like anything.
It's debated, but hopefully, you know, we are heading in the right direction. There's a lot to correct. There's a lot to correct. Most of the paleoanthropologists that will argue with you will rely on present or recent hunter-gatherer groups, like the Hazda.
Right.
Yeah, the Hazda get like 60-70% of their of the calories from plants, or honey as well. So they say, okay, the Hazda can do it, why these people couldn't do it? Now this prey size decline, or the large animal mega herbivores decline, is your answer.
Exactly.
Mega herbivores change the environment completely. Environment where elephants are around, and many of them, is a completely different environment than the Hazda is occupying today.
Exactly.
Until about 100 years ago, the Hazda had elephants. Today, they don't have any elephants, almost none. Elephants are, each elephant, in the Kruger Park, there was a study, each elephant killed, they say killed 1,600 trees a year. So they completely changed the environment. They are actually like little farmers or big farmers. Okay, they prepare the land for themselves. So if you don't have elephant around, you have a completely different environment. And this is why the Hazda, for instance, get 40% of the calories because of one tree, the baobab tree.
Right.
They eat the seeds, they eat the fruit, they eat the honey of the bees that are on it. But when you have elephants, you don't have baobab tree. They just kill it. They hate baobab tree. So you have elephants, you don't have baobab tree. So the environment today is not like the environment, and this is like the recent research is dwelling on it and finding more and more how important are large animals to the environment, and what the change in the environment happened because of the disappearing of these large animals.
So the extinction of these megafauna, the changing of the size of the animals, and we can go into this, we've got some studies, probably that almost certainly played into the way that humans eat, and the extinction of the megafauna changes, or the fact that we probably hunted the megafauna to extinction changes the way we eat and how available fat is and how available calories are, and has led in situations like the Hazda to situations where people need to eat plants, or they eat plants because that's what's available. But in the past, when the megafauna were around, we had a much greater return on our hunting investment. And there's a strong argument that we were hunting megafauna, we had much greater access to calories and fat. Am I understanding that properly?
Absolutely. The only other point is that they are using iron. They have been using iron for hundreds of years. So if you use iron instead of a stone tool, you save so much time that you can walk around looking for plants. But if you have to get the raw material for iron, for stone, okay? Stone is, you waste a lot of material. I mean, you you create a very sharp edge, but it becomes dull very quickly. So there is a lot of time and a lot of effort invested in maintaining an economy that relies on stone tool. And today they have iron. So anyway, from both this analogy of recent hunter-gatherer with Paleolithic hunter-gatherer is just a complete nonsense. I have a paper in for review, and I hope it will be published soon. But I think it just destroys, hopefully, this way of thinking. And this is, if you read all the papers that try to estimate the trophic position of humans in the Paleolithic, all of them are using in the end, they all result to recent hunter-gatherers.
So they're sort of misinterpreting it based on
Absolutely.
the way we're currently looking at it versus the way we were. Okay, let's pause for a moment here. I'll screen share and show people a few graphs that you had from your Ancestral Health Symposium talk, which I thought were awesome and illustrate some of these points. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I'll screen share this one. So as you can see here, this is a slide that Miki had in his Ancestral Health Symposium in 2018. And it's referring to his point that when you are hunting, I'm sorry, I can try and make it a little bigger. When you are hunting the big animals, the large game, that the return on the hunting investment is much greater. You get many more calories per hour. But when you're hunting small animals, reptiles, the return on your investment per hour of hunting in terms of kilojoules is almost equivalent to that of like a plant. That this is one of the major points here, is that when we're not hunting large animals, when megafauna has become extinct, these incredible 12-ton elephants, I can't even imagine what a 12-ton elephant looks like, but that the return on the investment of hunting something like a woolly mammoth is just so great. And we have been forced, the hypothesis would be that we have been forced as our contemporary indigenous people, like the Hadza, have been forced to use different sources because there are not these great large animals around anymore. And that may not be reflective of what we were doing 300,000 years ago as Homo sapiens.
Leave that one on.
This one, yeah.
Leave that one on. And what you see on the chart here is the degree of extinction of large animals during the periods where Homo was around. Okay, so for 65 million years, it starts with the mice on the left. Yeah.
Yep.
The mean body weight of terrestrial mammals went up and up and up from a few hundred grams, and it reached 2.5 million years ago. It reached 500 kilos.
So I'll just show that. That's right here. You can see what Miki's talking about is mice are going, there's mice, and then on the x-axis here is millions of years ago. So we're talking, 65 million years ago, and then we're going up, 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 and then it reaches a huge size here 2.5 million years ago. Is that right?
By the way, it's huge in our mind, but if you go back to the dinosaurs, okay, there was another period where there were huge animals around.
Right.
So it's not so exceptional to have very big animals around.
And then what happens here, Miki, because this is what's such a cool point that you had in this talk with the AHS, is that 2.5 million years ago, it just drops like a rock. It just goes, whoa, the size of the animals gets so much
the only problem
smaller.
I have with this chart, and I need to say, I don't know when this drop started. Actually, it most probably was even sharper than what you see, because the present information that I have and that's lying around is that the actual decline started about 600,000-700,000 years ago. So it's even steeper than what you see here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but it doesn't matter. It's steep enough as it is for everybody. I don't see how can anybody say this has nothing to do with humans. This is human, because climate, which is the second contender, always the alternative contender, there were all types of climate during the 65 million years, and there was no biased extinction of large animals.
So you're saying, because people might argue there was a large extinction from animals because weather changed, but you're saying there have been weather changes preceding this that did not cause large extinctions. And we're not talking about the dinosaurs here, because we're talking about a period. We're not talking about the dinosaurs extinction. We're talking about in the last 65 million years, and more specifically in the last 2.5 million years, there was this, or maybe perhaps you're saying the last 600,000 years, this very rapid decline in the size of the animals, and that this may indicate that humans were hunting these animals frequently, causing mass extinctions, and that has changed the way that we have been eating.
I think you just have to look at the graph. This is not something natural. This is not a phenomena that can be called natural phenomenon, this decline. It's just something so dramatic. But also there are other studies that show that the decline is exactly following humans. In other words, when humans got to the America, the decline started in America. When humans got into Australia, the decline started in Australia. It's the same everywhere. And always starting with the largest animal. The largest animal disappear first, okay? There is no weather pattern that can actually justify, that can provide any mechanism why larger animal will always, disappear. And then the next one and the next one. It's like they are standing in a queue to disappear.
And so I'll just remind people listening that this is exactly what Miki was talking about with the time frame, that 2.5 million years ago is, when we get Homo erectus, right? Or 1.8, for Homo erectus. But
2 million years ago.
Yeah, this is the time when, and like Miki's saying, we're not sure, but like when the Homo species, whether it was Homo erectus or some of these, probably Homo erectus, when Homo erectus arrived on every continent, there seems to be this incredible correlation between Homo erectus arriving and these large animals getting hunted. It's probably not a weather phenomenon.
They're getting hunted, yes, but not getting extinct. I want to be clear. The extinction when I'm talking about 600, 700,000 years ago, I'm talking about Africa. Okay, in Europe, I don't think there is any sign of extinction until about 60,000 years ago.
Of the megafauna.
In Asia as well. So this extinction started in Africa. And you have this paper by Smith of 2018.
Yes.
And
we can pull it up. Whenever you're ready, I can go to the screen share.
Yeah, anyway, she says there in the paper, she says that by 125,000 years ago, the expected mean body weight of population in Africa was 50%, or the actual was 50%, half of what was expected for such a large continent. Because the size of the continent also has to do with the body weight, mean body weight. So that's why I tell you, I don't know exactly when it happened, but it happened, it started in Africa. And it started, and she says herself, she says that's, she attributed to the presence of humans in Africa during that period. This decline, this 50% of the expected.
And so what we're kind of getting here is this idea that humans, Homo erectus, Homo sapiens, later, we have been hunting animals in large numbers. This has been a huge part of our diet for so long. And this is what I would argue, and maybe you would agree with this, you can tell me if you disagree, is that this hunting of animals was a key part of what made us human and what made us continue as a species, whether it was Homo erectus or Homo sapiens, and that, like you were talking about, access to fat and access to fat calories and access to micronutrients in animals was key to our our continuation, our longevity as a species, and that we have been hunting these animals as a central part of our diet and our daily existence as humans since we walked the earth as Homo erectus. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. All of human evolution is an evolution of a herbivore or a frugivore to a carnivore. This is everything is the size, even the sociality, the fact that we are sharing we're sharing our food, everything you can actually interpret it as building ourselves to become carnivore, to get hold of animals. Brain, we needed the brain because we don't have any other means to hunt. We don't run fast. We don't have this big canine teeth. We don't have big nails. We don't have the muscle to do it. So we needed the brain. We needed long legs because carnivores have a larger home range than other animals. So we needed mobility. We needed to be efficient in our mobility. We needed the right stomach, the right gut, the right digestive system, the right teeth. By the way, today I read a review paper that claimed that the shape of our nose, there's something like what's called something like about sensing smell. Okay, some bulb in the nose.
Right.
That olfactory bulb, something.
Mm-hmm.
We have big ones. We have big, today I read it. There's a new paper. We have relatively big olfactory bulbs in the nose.
Mm-hmm.
And he claimed that this is typical of carnivores.
That's
okay, the shape,
right.
Yeah, the shape of the nose, okay? If you look at the chimps and if you look at the other primates, the nose is flat. Our nose, the nostrils actually point to the ground, okay? Their nose is point to a head. So his theory is this is all because we were, I don't know, but because we were evolving to become a carnivore.
So I love this. You're sort of bringing up this issue, and you talked about this in your Ancestral Health Symposium talk from 2018, which people should definitely go watch. That in addition to these sort of anthropologic questions, we're looking at big mammals getting extinct and the megafauna. There are all of these adaptations that it looks like we had from Australopithecus to Homo Erectus to Homo Sapiens, which enabled us to be hunters. And I want to get into that. That's an amazing topic. I just want to show people real quickly this paper. I'll screen share here, and then we'll move on to these other concepts. So this is the paper that Miki's talking about. This is in the journal Science, the body size downgrading of mammals over the late Quaternary period. And the Quaternary period we discussed is like the Paleolithic
That's the 2.5 million years.
Okay, that's 2.5 million years is the Quaternary period. And I'll go down to this graph, and hopefully Miki and I were sort of talking about it before we got online. You can see here, this is 65 million years ago. The mean body mass rises up until 5 million years ago. Then we have the Pleistocene, and then it starts to drop. And this is sort of what Miki was illustrating in his talk, that over this amount of time, 5 million to now, the size of these animals is dropping rapidly. So it just goes back to this idea that this really was a part of human evolution, the change in the size of these, animals, and that if we look at the way that we are now, contemporary hunter-gatherers may not be the best indication of the way that we were previously as humans. And then I'll just make this other point before we move on to these body size adaptations. Maybe we can talk about this study briefly, Miki. So this is one of the things that I think was so interesting is this series of studies that came out looking at the isotopes in Neanderthals, and that the fact that might give us some indication of what these Neanderthals and what these early humans were eating. I'll let Miki talk about the study, but the study that we'll talk about, or one of the studies we'll reference, is this one, the exceptionally high D15 nitrogen values and collagen single amino acid levels confirm Neanderthals as high-trophic level carnivores. I love the title of the study. I love this concept that we can look at nitrogen levels. If we go back, we're still sort of in the anthropologic sphere, but if we go back, 300,000 to 200, we're probably talking even 60, 70,000 years ago with these Neanderthals, we can look at the amount of nitrogen in these collagen tissues and say, well, they were eating a lot of animals. Walk us through this.
Okay, actually, there is even a better one that was published just at the same time.
Okay.
That talks about Homo sapiens and Neanderthals, and actually compares the two.
Yes, yes. I can reference that in the show notes.
Yeah. So this the N15 isotope, the amount, the relative amount that you have in your body can say how much protein you consumed relative to other animals in the environment. So herbivores normally have lower level than carnivores. So what you do, you go to the archaeological site and you get some collagen out of the bones. So this method, one must say, is only available for a relatively recent period, because you have to have collagen. And so it's about 50,000 years ago. This is the limit of the period. And mostly it's done in Europe because the collagen preserved in colder conditions, etc. So there are quite a few. I think I managed to find at least more than 10 studies of Homo sapiens, not even Neanderthals, but Homo sapiens. And all of them come up with the result that humans were carnivore. Homo sapiens was a carnivore. So a very high percentage of his diet or his protein came from animals. The same goes for Neanderthal, of course. The notion was that Neanderthal was even more carnivore than humans, than modern humans.
Mm-hmm.
And the latest study actually showed that they were both hunters of big animals.
Mm-hmm.
Big animals concentrate a little more of the isotope than smaller animals. So you can actually find out if humans had a higher level than carnivores in their environment, they interpret it as humans ate larger animals.
Right.
Because larger animals have more of the isotope. Of the
nitrogen isotope.
Yeah, so they can tell you that humans and Neanderthals, both of them fed on mammoths and large animals.
And so what you're saying, and this is one of the points that I think is so interesting to compare, is that they can look at the collagen from these Neanderthals and these Homo sapiens, and they can look at these nitrogen values in the collagen, and they can actually compare that nitrogen to the amount of nitrogen in the collagen from a known carnivore. Like, I don't know what kind of carnivore would have been around.
Well, hyena is a good one.
Yeah.
You find a lot of hyenas because they live in caves too. And so, yeah, hyenas is normally the one.
And when they compare the amount of nitrogen in the collagen of a Neanderthal or Homo sapiens, we had the same or more than these hyenas, more. So we had more. Yeah, so we were probably eating larger animals, or we were on par with these known carnivorous animals at this time, saying, okay, and I love, it's such an interesting thing. I mean, it just gets back to this idea, I don't think necessarily that saying, well, our ancestors were 70,000 years ago were carnivores. That 100% means we should be carnivores now. If people follow my work and some of your work, they may know that you and I may believe that humans can be carnivores now, or in some cases may be healthy. But I just think it's such an interesting evolutionary concept to think like we probably were carnivores. So it's not crazy to think that we were carnivores. And I think that really the point that we're trying to make here is that interpreting the way that currently living hunter-gatherers do it is not relevant to what we may have done as humans, and it's not relevant to what may be in our genetics. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
First of all, the Hazda are not sick. I mean, they are healthy. They are eating a lot of plants and they are healthy. So we have to sort of agree to that,
Right.
By the way, they still have some teeth problem because they eat too much honey.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's another paper.
So I'll just mention here, one of the concepts that I've sort of talked about in my YouTube videos is the idea that humans may in fact be facultative carnivores, that there are these obligate and facultative carnivores. And maybe I'd be curious about your opinion on this, and that humans can probably eat plants for survival. I think you even talked about this in some of your presentations, that plants may be like survival food. And I think that's such an interesting concept that I would agree with, that the Hadza can eat the plants, and we know that humans can live on plants, but it kind of gets to this underlying question, are plants, well, the underlying question I would pose would be, are animals actually the optimal food? And if we have access to all the animals we need to be fully optimal humans, is there any real role for plants? You know, if we're a facultative carnivore, we can eat plants during times of starvation or during times of scarcity, or if our environment changes, for instance, like you're saying, the Hadza have the baobab tree, you know, they don't have access to megafauna, we can eat some plants as survival food. But then this underlying question is, animals may be the optimal food, and could we be more optimal if we were eating more animals? What do you think about that concept?
I totally agree. I mean, you know, meat is and fat are so much more pure, let's say, compared to other food. You know, they went and they asked them what food they prefer. So the results were, the first one was actually honey. And the second one was meat. And only later came all the other. And the tubers, which everybody says was the main, everybody supports high plant consumption for humans in the Paleolithic, talk about tuber.
Right.
Because all the other foods are very seasonal, okay? Tubers are not so seasonal. So everybody says tubers. But that tubers was the last on their list. They really eat it if they have nothing else.
Exactly.
To eat. They don't like it. It's a lot of work. It's some of them, all kinds of species, but some of them are very feverish.
Right.
So they don't like tubers at all. Meat, anytime. Fat. When they ask about fat, they say, yeah, fat is the best thing.
I love it. And you know, this parallels what you'll see in books like about the Inuit, Fat of the Land by Villemar Stephenson.
Right.
He says that the Inuit said the same thing, that they only ate, and I'm paraphrasing here, they only ate quote unquote plants when quote unquote real food was not available. And you see this in all these cultures. I did a post on Instagram. It was a quote from Fat of the Land by Villemar Stephenson, who, for people who don't know, was an Arctic explorer who lived with the Inuit for years. It's fascinating history around that. But the indigenous cultures would often say, we will eat plants when animals are not available. And if animals are always available, the indigenous cultures knew that was the highest quality food, right?
Let me tell you an interesting one. I have a paper in the Journal of Evolution and Health about the symbolic side of fat. So I went and looked what people, how people used fat in all kinds of symbolic things like language and all kinds of ceremonies, things like that. So the one that I remember, I had like 200. There are 200 examples of how people use fat in all kinds of ceremonies. But the one that I remember the most is the name of the Maya, I think it's a Maya god, translate to plenty of fat. And today in the Andes, the Indian, when they say good morning or hello, that's not their word. They actually, what they say is plenty of fat, hi. Instead of hi or hello, the word, actually what they say is plenty of fat.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
This idea, and I mean, this goes back to your Ancestral Health Symposium talk in 2012, where you said humans are fat hunters, and that was one of my first impressions. You know, of humans as carnivores or humans as hunters, but humans as fat hunters, I think it makes so much sense. And we touched on this earlier, the idea that humans can't eat more than 35% of their calories from protein, really. And so we need to make up that 65%, either as carbohydrates or fat. And the fat, when you're having the fat, that's what humans want. And they hunted, fat animals, and they wouldn't kill lean animals. And I think there are examples of this in indigenous culture or anthropological literature, or looking at indigenous cultures. If there are only lean animals around, I think you said this, if there are only lean animals around, they would say there's no food. There's no food if there's only lean animals. You'll have to send me that paper. That's so interesting. I'll just do a screen share here for a moment. I want to show people this other paper, which I think may be the one. Is this the one that is better that you were talking about? The stable isotope reveals patterns of diet.
Yeah. We see. Yeah.
Okay, so this is
Neanderthal and first model human. Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, that's the one.
So this is the other paper Miki was talking about, saying that this one is even a little better. The title for people who are listening is Stable Isotopes Reveal Patterns of Diet and Mobility in the Last Neanderthals and First Modern Humans in Europe. And what they did in this paper was they actually compared, they looked at the amount of nitrogen in both of those peoples, and they found that the first modern humans in Europe and the Neanderthals both had this high level of nitrogen. And
both were eating the same animals.
They were eating the same animals. Yeah, it's such an interesting concept. So I love it. It's so cool. Well, let's talk a little bit about these adaptations, because you've talked about this before in your talks, and I think this is another piece of it that's really cool. If we look at human biology and we look at the way that humans are built now, we have, and people like to talk about the teeth and the gut, but let's talk about all of these ways that humans are kind of built now to be hunters, that sort of suggests hey, we are hunting animals. This is what makes us human. This is our primary focus, is how to hunt animals.
Right. So, that's the only way to find out, is to get as much information as possible from all science field, all fields of science that you can grab. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going and finding, as much as I can from other fields of science, and I'm sure I'm just scratching the surface with this with the physiology, because it's not. First of all, it's not my area, human biology. But for instance, take the stomach acidity. I think this is the killer. I mean, we have, it starts with, say, herbivores. They have acidity of maybe 6 or 5 or something like that.
Right.
Omnivores have 3 or 4. Carnivores have 2 to 3. And we are with 1.5. pH, I'm talking about a pH.
Yes.
So it's very, very, very acidic. And to keep acidic stomach is very expensive, energetically expensive, to produce the acid and to maintain the walls of the stomach to retain that acid, right? So it's not something that happened by chance. And this is it's almost like with the isotopes. So they compare, what's the acidity of other animals, and they found out that the acidity of scavengers, are in this range, 1.5 pH. So they decided in the paper that humans were probably more scavengers than we thought. But they don't know that humans are hunters of big animals. Now, if you hunt a big animal, it can last you for days, weeks, or even months. Yeah. During that time, the pathogen load is building up. So you need the acidity to deal with the pathogen load. Right. So we are kind of hunter or a predator that also scavenge on his hunt, on his animal. We scavenge on them for days, weeks. So that's why we need the acidity. Yes. And I think this is a killer. I mean, maybe people need all other pieces of information, fine, we'll get them. But how can you explain it? You cannot explain it any other way.
No, I agree with you. I've always thought the stomach acid was so interesting. And, as a physician, we see this, it's the acidity of the human stomach is incredibly low, like the human stomachs are incredibly acidic. And for people who are familiar, when we're looking at pH, we're looking at a logarithmic measure of the concentration of hydrogen ions in the stomach of something, right? So a low pH means a very acidic environment. And so what Miki's saying is that when the pH is 6, that's less than 7. So technically we would call it acidic, but it's not very acidic, relatively speaking. And then as we go from the pH of 6 in an herbivore to the pH of 3 in an omnivore to the pH of 1.5 in a carnivore, and humans having a pH of 1 to 2, it's really our stomachs look like the stomachs of carnivores.
No, carnivore have 2 to 3.
Oh, 2 to 3, yes.
1.
Yeah.
So
and then
carnivores have higher acidity or lower acidity than we do.
And so we're the scavengers because we are killing the things that have been in our stomach for such a long amount of, killing the things, and then they may grow bacteria. So we have to have the super low stomach acid. So
yeah, look, a normal scavenger actually consumes food within an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours a day. Okay, we have to keep them for weeks. So yeah, we need the acidity.
Evolutionary adaptation to hunting animals and hunting big animals, it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
And if you look at our digestive system, from what I can tell, the digestive system of a human is most like that of a dog, and dogs are clearly carnivorous. And I think people would argue dogs are facultative carnivores, but, and we can talk about the size of the gut and the different parts of the gut, but our digestive system looks like the digestive system of a canine or a wolf. It doesn't look like the digestive system of a primate anymore. And so I love this concept that we sort of touched on earlier, that when we went from, Australopithecus was around, there was a real difference between Australopithecus and Homo erectus. And that was a change in the way everything looked. It was our gut, our acidity, and other things. And it's really suggesting that is our transition from primate to human. And that, I would argue, and I think maybe you would agree with this, that transition from primate to human was a transition from an herbivore to a carnivore.
Yeah, there are in evolution, you can ask a different question. You can ask whether humans evolved to specialize, a specialist, or as a generalist. Okay, so you'll find the paleoanthropologists that say, yeah, we evolved to become generalists because we could eat everything. But one of the tests is when you evolve something, when something develop in your body or behavior that help you to eat some type of food, but then interrupt in your eating of a different kind of food. So when you take the stomach, when you take the gut, yes, and I calculated that the large intestine shrink by about 70%, 70%, okay, compared to chimpanzee. So if you have a chimpanzee my size standing next to me, I will have a large intestine that is 70% smaller than his.
Right.
And a small intestine that is 60% larger or bigger than his. Okay. So this decline in the size of the large intestine is actually a proof that we evolved away from plant food, because plant food in nature has a lot of fiber. So our capacity to exploit fiber diminished very dramatically. So that's another proof for you that the evolution was towards specialization and not towards generalization.
I agree. And I've spoken about fiber a lot. If anyone's listened to my stuff, they'll know that on basically almost every podcast I do, I'll talk about all the studies that show that fiber is not beneficial to humans from a cancer perspective, from a lipid perspective, from a blood pressure perspective, that we don't need it for a healthy gut flora, that it doesn't prevent diverticulosis, that I think that the medical literature supports the idea that fiber is not necessary nor beneficial to humans very strongly. And this flies in the face. And what you're suggesting here is so cool. It's mirrored in our guts. Like, we don't need fiber to have a healthy gut. Our guts don't look like fiber-loving guts. The other really interesting adaptation that you mentioned in your talk was this one of throwing. And I know people have talked about that too. This, like, the idea that our shoulder developed to throw, that we are the only species on the planet that can, like, throw something. Talk a little bit about this. I think this is so cool.
Well, that's it. That's the paper. The paper claims that, and it's not my area again. I can't talk to you about the different bones and connections and that, but I'm sure you can do it better than I do. But that we evolved to throwing. And this is, again, is throwing, this evolution of throwing actually interrupt us from climbing. So we had shoulders that were adapted to climbing, okay? And once you adapt to throwing, it interrupts in your climbing. So it's, again, away from, I mean, people say, okay, we ate fruit. Yeah, we ate food, but the fruits are on the tree and nobody waits for us. And we can't climb. So we didn't eat that many food. We couldn't. So again, it's a specialization. This throwing, the evolution to throwing is a specialization because it interrupts us in procuring plant food. Help us in procuring animals.
Yeah. So I guess, this is what it's coming back to, that I would argue that by becoming human, that part of us becoming human was us becoming hunters in all of these ways, you know, and that hunting was what made us human, or like, we became human because we hunted. We're hunters, you know, as humans. It's such an interesting concept. I want to circle back a little bit, because I think there's this interesting concept, and you can speak more to this than I can, that this group hunting, the way that Homo sapiens would hunt in groups. And I think this is such an interesting concept that perhaps, and maybe I'm wrong about this, you can let me know, perhaps one of the things that allowed Homo sapiens to be so successful was that we developed the ability to communicate in groups and hunt in groups and kill animals en masse, and that we were able to sort of cooperate to kill animals in a special way that maybe the Neanderthals weren't. Have you heard of this concept that, like, you know, that the Homo sapiens, the early European humans, were hunting in different ways?
Yes, but not in the way that you are describing it.
Okay.
There is the argument. First of all, let's talk about hunting in groups, okay? This must have been done by Homo erectus, because to hunt a big animal, and this is, by the way, is based on present or recent hunter-gatherer. This is a paper by Churchill, 1993. He went and he studied how hunter-gatherer hunt. And it shows that the method for hunting large animals is different than the methods for hunting smaller animals. Large animal, what you do is you limit its movement. Okay, one way you drive it to a marsh, or you drive it to a canyon, or you limit its movement one way or another, and then you finish it. So limiting its movement, you may need a lot of people, because the large animals, they don't run away normally. I mean, an elephant, if you face an elephant, he will just kill you. He will just beat you. Right. So you need a lot of people, okay, to frighten a large animal, because then they treat the whole group as one animal. So I think that the large groups actually where Homo erectus had even larger groups. That's my feeling. Nobody knows, by the way, the size of the groups. Right. I just attended a year ago about a seminar about it, and the conclusion is that nobody knows what was the size of the group. Today there are 25. Some group depends on the situation. So large group and cooperation of large groups, in my opinion, started with Homo erectus. Mm-hmm. Because he had to hunt larger animals and he had to limit their mobility, their motion, in order to finish it. Now, going back to the Homo sapiens and the Neanderthal in Europe, the claim is that actually humans came to Europe with a technology that enabled them to hunt smaller animals more efficiently than Neanderthals. Now, my PhD work was on the extinction of the Neanderthals. And my conclusion is that by the time that the modern human came to Europe, the Neanderthal was already half finished, if not more than that. So, because the extinction of large animals started in Europe 50,000 years ago, while the modern humans came to Europe 35,000 years ago. So there was like 15,000 years for the Neanderthal to cope with a decline in large animals. So he was already more or less finished. So I don't think this was the reason, but this was the reason probably why modern humans managed to live through this extinction. Yeah, the late quaternary extinction that started in Europe about 50,000 years ago, but continued until I think 10,000 years ago. So he could cope with it because he had the technology. He had the bow and arrow already from Africa when he left Africa.
Right.
Now, why the Neanderthals didn't have it? Because they didn't need it. They were large animals. Normally you don't hunt large animals with bow and arrow. Just a spear is enough. Because they don't run fast. They don't run away from you. So you don't have to catch them with a bow and arrow. So, and also, modern humans were lighter. Like they were about 10 kilo lighter than Neanderthal. So less energy. And also they were taller. So they were moving more efficiently in the area. So if you hunt smaller animals, your home range is increasing. You have to move more. And you can see it in the archaeological record that their home range was higher or larger than that of Neanderthals. And this is why they manage, I think.
It's so interesting, yeah. And that goes back to this idea, you know, who we are as Homo sapiens, where we've come from, Homo erectus, the people we've interacted with, Neanderthals, and what made us humans. So,
by the way, it's interesting point. Many people know it, but some maybe don't. Their brain size, average brain size was 1,500 cc. Today, the average brain size is 1,350.
It's so much bigger.
So it went down
from
1,500 cc to 1350, 1,350 cc in the last 20,000 years.
What do you think's going on there?
You don't need a lot of brain to grow
crops.
It doesn't move. The action repeats itself. There's nothing that is really unexpected. It's like a program. You have the 4 or 5 steps that you have to do, and that's it. To hunt an animal, you need to know so much about the nature. You need to be you make a lot of very quick decisions about, things. You need to be able to track animals. And so you need much more brain to hunt than to farm.
And we talked about that earlier, this increasing size of the brain from Australopithecus to Homo erectus and throughout. And then it's interesting to see it shrinking as we're becoming pastoralists. So
it increased because we had to hunt, and it decreased because we didn't have to.
So if we want bigger brains, we have to start hunting more again.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well,
you have to challenge. You have to challenge.
Yes, we have to challenge our brains.
Many of us are challenging ourselves each day, so we don't have a problem losing our brain. But yes, they had a challenge every day to hunt and to track. You need a lot of brain to track animals.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah,
it's a scientific process.
Yeah,
you make an observation, you create a hypothesis, you go and further collect more observation, and you change your hypothesis based on the new observation.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a completely scientific process.
We're learning.
Yeah.
It's so cool. Well, Miki, thank you so much for this conversation. I learned a ton. I know that you and I are going to be in contact in the future as I'm writing this chapter in my book on anthropology and where humans have come from. Where can people find you? If people want to reach out to you, where are you? How do people get in touch and learn more from you?
I'm quite active on Twitter. I don't remember my handle. But,
is it Ben Dor Miki?
Yeah, it could be. Yeah.
I'll tell you. Oh, look, hold on. I'll find you on Twitter. We'll tell people your handle. Is that the best place to reach you?
Yeah. There's my blog that we mentioned before, paleostyle.com.
Paleostyle.com?
Yeah.
Yeah, on Twitter you are Ben Dor Miki. So BenDorMiki.
Right.
And paleostyle.com. Okay.
And yeah, I have a blog in Hebrew, but I don't think many of your listeners will. I have like something close to 300 posts in Hebrew in my blog.
Because you're based in Israel, right?
Yeah, I thought, that was missing. The Israelis who don't read English well didn't have the information, so I thought I'll do it. So I spent a lot of time on it, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad that there's some English blogging too that I'll have to dig into myself, but yeah. Thank you for coming on. It's such an interesting discussion hearing about, from an anthropologist, human evolution and our just intimate ties with animals and hunting and how this shaped our evolution and where we've come from. So hopefully people have learned a lot from this, and I look forward to talking with you more.
I was very glad to do it with you because I appreciate what you're doing for the carnivore diet. I myself practice it now, and you're doing a great job.
Oh,
well, thank you. It's very important that doctors are coming into the field. I remember when I started, there was one doctor, Michael Eads, and that was it. And all the rest of us were like amateur. And now the doctors are pouring in, and it's fantastic to see.
And it's so interesting for me, if people have listened to my stuff, they'll know that from a medical perspective, it's just such an interesting thing to see the way that changing the way we eat as humans affects who we are in terms of health and disease. And, I'm of the opinion that animal foods are the ultimate food for humans, and that for a lot of people, eating vegetables and plants can cause autoimmunity. And these connections with this idea that we've been eating a lot of animals for all of our evolution as humans, and that these are probably the primal fuel source, just really helped kind of put it all in context for me. So it's awesome.
And the psychiatric angle is also very interesting. My wife is psychotherapist.
Oh, really?
And you can imagine the frustration that I have when I hear about all these cases of depression and bipolar. And I say, why don't we work together? Let me talk to these guys.
Yes.
I won't, of course, because I don't deal with clinical work at all. I will never do it. I don't like it. I'm not good at it. So I won't do it. But it's so frustrating that I can't. She's working for years with people with all the mental illnesses that you know. And it's so frustrating that I can't do anything about it and help them.
I agree. And as a physician, if people know about me, they'll know that I'm trained in psychiatry and that I'm an MD, and but I think about things as a functional medicine doc. So I treat people from all different things. But, I do think that from a psychiatric perspective, the benefits we see of a carnivore diet are striking, whether we're talking about Amber O'Hearn or Michaela Peterson or all of these anecdotes on meatheals.com. And I think that the psychiatric benefits and the idea that a diet could change untreatable or recalcitrant psychiatric disease is amazing. So yeah, it's super exciting time for me too. So, well, thank you so much for coming on. I really look forward to talking with you more in the future and interacting and continuing to learn from you, Miki.
Okay, we love to. Thank you.
All right, you guys, what'd you think? Pretty cool, right? I love the anthropology stuff, and I so appreciate what Miki has done. And how he has contributed to this space. So if you have questions about this stuff, do your research. My book will be coming out very soon. Like I said, please check out my work at carnivoremd.com, and you can sign up for my newsletter there. If you like this podcast, Leave me a review. I appreciate you all. The reviews drive traffic. We're doing so good. We've got like over 300 reviews. I've only been out like 4 months and I've got over 300 reviews. 5-star podcast. It's great. The podcast is growing because we're providing good information to people. And that's what I'm about. That's what makes me get up in the morning. That's what I really enjoy doing more than anything else right now. The book is coming along really well. Like I said, sign up for my newsletter if you want to be on the first line of people who hear about all the cool stuff that's happening with me, get exclusive offers, and you'll hear about the pre-order stuff because it's going to be out really soon, and you guys can support me in a really special way by pre-ordering. That helps with first week sales, which drive rankings, and that helps the book get to more people. So the pre-orders are super important, and as a special thank you to everyone who does that, I'm going to do that live, AMA, in person, or via Skype. If you want to come hang out with me in person, you can. Maybe I'll announce it somewhere in person and people can come to San Diego and we'll do it in person, and I'll also record it and people can dial in and ask questions. That actually sounds super fun. So that is all for this week, you guys. Check out White Oak Pastures. Use the code CarnivoreMD for first-time orders, Carnivore15 for 15% off the beef bones, the beef fat, beef tongue, and some other great stuff, which is on special at info.whiteoakpastures.com/CarnivoreMD. Check out Ancestral Supplements and all of the amazing stuff that they are making. They are putting back in what the modern world has left out. Saladino MD is the code on their Shopify site. All right, you guys, I will see you in the future, and I appreciate you all.